This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's Cass, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
To start, Doug Stone, my neighbor, retired firefighter, severe PTSD survivor. Really good story. One thing that I wanted to highlight, Cass, before we even got into the whole thing was he's the second close neighbor that we have between the two of us that's been sitting in the chair to talk about this kind of stuff. And the point that I wanted to make to the listeners was, guys, you just never know.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be the little lady across the street. It could be the dad whose kids, your kids play together in the park next door. You never know. So I go back to what we were talking about a year ago on 4-letter F words. And I say, be weird, man. Ask the questions. Like if you see somebody that's just a little off or, got a different look on their face today, ask them what's up, man. I mean, the worst they're going to say is no, fuck you. But you might open a door to a good conversation.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that before we get into Doug's story. Doug, welcome.
Yeah, welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Roscoe and Cass. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
How myself and Roscoe met is pretty amazing, to say the least. Like he was just talking about, most of our relationship has been walking around the community, just talking when we're
That
not.
mind, body, soul balance, man.
And I got to tell you, it was very helpful during the times I was going through. I looked forward to our walks, and we haven't done them in a while. Life changes and stuff happens, but it is and will down the road continue to be a great relationship, and we help each other. So,
well, you randomly meet somebody I think you were outside doing some yard work, and Katie and I were walking around the neighborhood, stopped, talked, chatted it up a little bit. Oh man, firefighter, cool. The next time I saw him, I was like, dude, we should just get together and fucking hang out a little bit. And we started going for walks around the neighborhood and sharing stories. And I think we have, through the military firefighter LEO communities, I think there's a lot of shared camaraderie for sure, but the stories aren't exactly the same. You change a couple of details and they really relate, I think, very well.
Yeah, the experiences are similar.
Yeah, for sure. So Doug, man, I want to go back all the way back to really from the very beginning. And then we'll get to the cool stuff. We'll get to the meat of the subjects here in a little bit. But for those of us who've dedicated our life to some sort of service, what was your calling to get into that? Like, how did you get into firefighting in the beginning?
That one's a tough one. My entire family was military and law enforcement. So that I was what we call the bastard fireman out of it. And that's nothing negative. It's just a joke that, firemen and cops have. And I don't know what got me personally into it when I was younger. I remember always, Halloween and stuff, wanted to be a fireman or a cop. My dad was a cop. So it led me to public safety. Kind of what happened is I went when I was 18 to the Marine recruiter, and I was told I was 5 pounds too heavy to join. And so I went, well, then I guess I can't join there. If I can't join them, then I don't want to join anybody else. And so I went away, back to school, obviously finished high school. And during that, I got the opportunity to start the fire service as a paid job with CAL FIRE when I was 18. And once I did that, it took me a few years to really understand this is what I want to do. And after that, it's pretty much all a big story coming up.
So initially there wasn't like this, we've talked about a lot how people get called into these different professions for a lot of different reasons. Some guys join the military to go to school, just to get the school benefits. Some guys join because, they have a lineage of, my dad was a pilot. My my grandfather was in World War II or Vietnam or whatever.
Lieutenant Dan syndrome.
Yeah. I want to do what my family does. It's our family industry or whatever. And some people are just fucking patriots, man.
Yeah.
We saw that a lot around 9/11, which is not too far after when all of us kind of started that, that profession. That was a big boom in that, in all of these industries, I think, because that was the one big moment in our life, in our generation. That was that coalescing moment of that. And everybody was like pro America for, a few months, it seemed like, around there. So when you joined up with it, there wasn't anything like that at first. It was just kind of like, oh, well, this is cool. Let me try this for a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we called it a nugget program with CAL FIRE. My father passed away when I was 10. And so I was raised by my mom, and one of her friends' husbands was a chief at CAL FIRE. And I was kicking around the idea, and really, I mean, I always wanted to serve the public in something was my thing. I didn't know what. And it came to the point where either I graduate high school and I go play semi-pro ball. I was looked at by some scouts. Our high school coach was a scout for 8 teams. And I also had some talk about a football scholarship. And it kind of just came to the fact that these aren't like realistic things for me, to go off and play baseball, and what does that accomplish? And so I had a decent opportunity to join. So 2 days after I graduated high school, I started the academy with CAL FIRE, which is 2 weeks. And I think my starting salary was like 60 cents below minimum wage at the time, because we worked 4/19s from 12 to 5 in the morning. You didn't get paid unless you ran a call.
What year was this?
This 96 is when I started my
so
career.
California hadn't gone completely off the rails yet.
No, not at all.
Okay. It was getting close. Yeah. They were probably within 5 or 6 years of that, right?
When I grew up, I mean, just to touch on that real quick, when I grew up, I rode my bike around everywhere. I'd ride it 10 miles to go from my country place to town. My mom knew about it as kids would. We were always safe. It was a great, safe place. Yeah, you're right about the rails. It was starting then, but it was nowhere close.
My wife went to high school in Orange County from 8th grade to 12th grade, down around Irvine, that area, around El Toro. And that was what she graduated in 95. So early 90s ish. And it wasn't bad yet. You could still rent a house for $1,000 or whatever it was. And then it seemed like the late 90s, early aughts, it just kind of got weird.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, continue.
No worries. So yeah, graduated high school, went to the academy. I started working over on the coast part of our county. The county was Mendocino County in California. And so I worked there for a few seasons. Honestly, I graduated high school. I probably gained a little too much weight. I ballooned up, didn't really take it seriously. And I think probably about year 2 or 3, they moved me to a busier station to either fire me or make me get it.
Yeah.
I got it. Lost a lot of weight over, the off season, and got in really good shape. Went to a busy station. And after 5 years of being on a fire engine, I got promoted to the helicopter. So I worked on a UH-1H Super Huey for 2 years. We're one of 9 in the state, still 9 in the state. It's a 5-person crew with 2 captains and a pilot usually. They've just switched to Firehawks or Blackhawks for you guys. So they probably carry more, I would guess. But yeah, I spent 2 years on that, saw some of the most amazing fire I ever have. We had a 300-gallon bucket, and our crew would get out with nothing else but our hand tools and hopefully the copter to back us up.
It's like, that's sort of similar to smoke jumping then.
Yeah, sort. The funny thing, we always joked with them. So in CAL FIRE community, we don't really like the feds. It's probably like you guys, you wouldn't like the state Air Force if we had one. And I don't mean that negatively, but you know what I mean? You always have that little part there.
There's always rivalry.
And so we always talk crap. And sure, when we were out on a fire, being on the helicopter, we'd have to go cut the guys out of trees because they would try to land. And they were great out in the middle of nowhere. They did good. But honestly, the helicopter with us, we would have the fire pretty much wrapped before they'd get in there. So no offense to them, great training. I would have loved to tried it, done it for the experience, but I think it's something you'll see that'll probably go away pretty soon. After that, I think at 22, it was maybe 23, I promoted to an engineer, which means I'm in charge of the fire engine. I drive it. I command the 2 firefighters on it, or 3, or whatever it could be. And I'm also the backup, I guess, captain of the station. And so with Cal Fire, when they send engines out of county, we call it, you get a big fire in the state, we'll send 5 engines out of that county, which has 14 engines in it, out. So with 9 stations, every station just has 1 engine. And so if the engineer was left behind, you're now the boss of the station.
Mm.
And so to take care of all kind of bureaucratical paperwork that you have to in the state and deal with everything, and now you're dealing with the chiefs, your captain guarded you from that. It's an eye-opening experience at 22.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say that happened. It seems like it happened pretty quick, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was 6 years total as a firefighter, 4 basically on an
Yeah.
engine, 2 on the helicopter, and then we had an influx where there was firefighters there that were on the copter, which is kind of the top of the firefighter realm in Cal Fire, for 10 years before promoting. They had this huge like freeze, not for money, no one would leave, and then all of a sudden retirement with PERS. Hey, guess what? You get full medical for your family and you when you retire. People started retiring like crazy.
Yeah.
They've cut that off now, obviously, and so it did. It made this big influx of young 20-year-olds now becoming what you could call an engine boss. I went through an academy up in Weed, California, which also burned down a few years later. And from there, I was assigned to an engine, and I worked that for a couple years. I also worked in the air program with the tankers as part of the base boss. And up until 2005, I was an engineer. Sometime in 5, there was or in 2004, I had a really bad accident, a car accident that killed some people, and it was pretty major. And it really messed me up. So I went to a debriefing, a CSID, critical incident stress debriefing. And that kind of opened my eyes to what I was dealing with. So either sometime in late 2004, early 2005, I was diagnosed with PTSD from my work. Accepted claim by the state, everything else. So that helped. In 2007, I transferred over to Lake County for 2007 and 8. Worked out of a Schedule A contract over there in a town called Middletown. You may have heard of it. It was a 2014 fire that burned that entire place up. And I worked there for a few years, and then I took a permanent job closer to home for less money with the town of Ukiah. It's multiple departments that we went through there, but it's all in Ukiah in Mendocino County. So most of my stuff with the state, just to kind of cap that, I've been all over the state. Like I've been on fires, north, south, everything. I was based out of Northern California. My whole career, I was based either out of Lake County or Mendocino County. When I went back to the local departments, I took a job there as an engineer and worked there with some pretty decent people at the time. And then all of a sudden we decided to merge departments. And that went to shit, to say the least. I was on quite a few incidents in 2017, and I had some very bad issues with PTSD going. And we had a fire in 17. It was 10/8 of 17. So everybody knows it means a lot to me. I was at home after 3 days. It was my first wedding anniversary from my ex-wife, and I took the trash out about 9 o'clock because I made her beef Wellington and asparagus. Didn't really drink that night. Normally, first day off, been up for 3 days. Let's have a few beers and go to sleep. So for some reason, I walked out of my house and I just stood there, and she's looking at me going, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Just give me a second." She goes, "I hate when you do this." So I came back in and I told her, I said, "It's weird. It's hotter now at 9 o'clock at night, and the wind's completely in a 180 direction." We had no idea red flags or anything. So we went to bed. About 11:45 or so that evening, I got a phone call from one of my firefighters, and they told me the entire valley was on fire. And I went, "Yeah, right." So I got in my pickup. I think I may have fell asleep for like a half an hour. I got my pickup and I lived down on the side of the hill. I got to the top of the hill, and all you could see was fire. So my ex-wife was with me. We raced down to the valley floor, which I grew up, knew everybody. That was my town. And what I saw was something I've never seen before in my life. And I've seen some pretty good fire. We raced down there. We stopped somewhere on East Road, which is just past the firehouse. And she told me, and I don't remember much of this. It's people telling me what I did. Another issue I have. And we started kind of protecting a few houses, and then we moved up a little more to where there's a fork in the road, East and West Road and Tomkai Road on this. And I met with the fire chief, who I've known for my whole career, and he assigned me to Division Zulu, which was all of West Road and Tomkai. To keep a very long story short, I evacuated probably by myself over 1,000 people that night by kicking their doors in, throwing them into their cars, and doing shit I should probably have never done to people, but it saved their life. I was severely injured and kept working the fire for 12 days. And that night, when stuff was really going bad, we had a burn injury report. And I kind of went back there. I was in charge of it. The IC, or the branch director, my buddy, the fire chief, was there. And we saw this guy very, very burned. Didn't recognize him. And they kept telling me like his family's still up there. And they said they were going to handle it. And I went on evacuating people. About 4 hours later, when we met back up, he told me who it was, and it basically a lifelong friend of mine and his family. His son was dead. We couldn't get to them. There was just no way. And that was something that has pretty much haunted me for about 5 years, of not making the decision to go up there. About a month later, after I was off the fire, I got a call from the charge nurse saying that the daughter died, 17 years old. And that put me into a huge tailspin. And probably ever since that date, I was on the downward spiral of my career. My career dissipation, like I was seeing it. I just couldn't accept it. And so I kept trying to work through it. And in 2018, we had the River Ranch fire, which was then the largest. And I was directly involved with the care of the fire chief from Utah that died. And basically what reminds me of that is we were standing what we call the Sea of Blue. We were all in our uniforms when they wheeled him out of the ER with the flag covering him. And I'm standing there with my ex-wife and other chiefs with their wives, and we all start crying. And I just looked around. I said, I can't do this to anybody. I can't do it to my wife, my mom. I just can't. And so it went downhill from there. I was having problems with flashbacks, and I don't mean like flashbacks of, hey, I remembered this and it scared me. I acted stuff out. Like I reacted the events. It was quite weird. And a lot of people were understanding and knowing about it. And so on March, I think 14th, I decided to drink myself to where I couldn't go to work. And I was doing this about once a month, my last day off. I didn't want to go. And so I'd get called out. And so I was called out on May 15th again, and I never went back to work.
What year was that?
2019. I spent most of the next time in the next couple of weeks doing okay at home. It was known if you take him away from work, this is going to be bad, because work kept me sane. I know it sounds very weird to people sometimes, but like being at work kept me focused.
Keeps you occupied.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I loved work. I loved what I did. Like I loved helping the community. I knew I was one of the better people in that area to do it. And I loved it. I started drinking after about 2 weeks. And I would say over the next 5 weeks or so, I got myself up to handle a handle of vodka a day, which is a 175, which we all know that's a pretty big bottle of booze. So on May 25th of 2019, my ex-wife came home from work. I was passed out in the bed about 8:30 at night, 7:30, whatever it was. And she called her sister and brother-in-law up to get her stuff out. She was dead. So they were making too much noise for me. So I said, well, screw this. I'm going to go down to my gun room, which I had a huge gun room with everything below the house. And was just sitting down there, and her sister-in-law came down, and they came up with some story that I was going to kill myself. Never even had a want or a thought of doing that. And so they called the cops, and they took me down. No holds, no nothing. But I did go to the hospital. The cops gave me a ride, and I'll say that I wasn't arrested or anything. Wasn't put on an order, but my blood draw was a .47.
Wow.
So why I say that is I know a lot of us in the service industry and everything else have ideations or thoughts of suicide. I can't say I ever did, but I can't tell you I didn't try to then without knowing it.
Yeah.
I mean, most people tell me
subconsciously, yeah.
And the knowledge I have medically, I should have known. And so I look at that. And so, when I get into the suicide talk, I just look at people, I think I tried without knowing, but I don't blame you. I get it.
Yeah.
And so it allowed me to understand that. So basically they took me out, they put me in a mental health area. I got to tell you, every cop from the Ukiah Police Department stopped by that morning to wish me well and check on me. So that should tell you the brotherhood that's still going through this. They sent me to some kind of weird psych ward that I know plenty about because of my job. And I went there for 3 days, got out, and they sent me to rehab that was supposed to be designed for first responders with PTSD and booze. I went to a rehab local for 14 days. On day 14, they told me my insurance would not cover me anymore because you don't have a drinking problem, you have a PTSD problem, and we don't treat that here. I said, that's funny. You got a whole program, and that's why we agreed to come here. Yeah, we don't. So I was discharged, remained sober for, I'll pretty much say for 5 years before I even really touched anything. Through that, and I have a beer or two now. I'm very good with that. We all know that I'm not an alcoholic. My alcoholism is driven by the mental in me. That's very documented, and I do believe that. I think we all have self-control in ways that we just need to find. After that, it was a very weird process. When I came home, my wife was living below my house in another big bedroom we had. And she stayed there until October when she went to a PTSD retreat. She went there, did some things that were considered ethics violations with a counselor, and was kicked out of there. During that time, when I came home from moving my mom to Arizona, she told me she was moving out. And I said, sounds good to me. And she couldn't believe why I had that attitude. And I was like, I knew this was coming. You're all over Facebook asking everybody in the community to rent a house, but you didn't tell me about it. Like,
yeah,
come on. And so she ended up moving out, not to drag that into it, but basically her family is very connected to all parts of law enforcement in Mendocino County, directly worked with the DA, as I did. I was sent to training by the DA to work on their firearms, their AR. I'm a gun expert, explosive expert, all kinds of other experts we found out now. So we did that. And finally she left. I helped her move to an apartment, and I filed for divorce January 25th. Her father, who is the lead DA investigator in the county, or was, visited me, and I actually talked to him about filing for divorce. And he goes, I get it, and don't ever think of me as your father-in-law. I am your father. And so he told me this, and we were best friends. People in that town even said the only reason you two are married is because of her dad. So, I can laugh about it. It's pretty well known. But so anyways, moving down the line, I started doing a lot of stuff with the community as far as like going with other first responders. I found a first responder group for PTSD, which was amazing because it's a small town. And stuff seemed to start going up. Sometime around March, I was here in Arizona visiting my mom, and I came home, and there was a lot of stolen stuff out of like my package box and from my house and stuff. And I couldn't figure it out. And then all of a sudden I get some leads on it, and it turns out that many things are being burglarized up in my area. I had the cops come out to my house, everything, talked to them. I know them all. I told them who it was. They couldn't do anything about it because of COVID, whatever their excuse was. Other agencies were watching them. So during all these documented flashbacks for about 6 months by cops, the DA knew my problem. I mean, I was tied into all these guys. On 5/24 of 2020, sorry, 4/24 of 2020, I walked into a lady's house at 10:30 at night, which was about 4 miles up from my house, up a dirt road. I had a fire there in 2004 where I lost 2 engines of Chief truck, 5 houses, and probably should have lost people. What I remember on the 24th is having a lot of issues with some people that just got promoted to chiefs and how they caused this incident, burned up millions of dollars and stuff, and almost killed people, and now they're being promoted. I got my vehicle, drove up to where the intersection was, where if you went left, that was the road for death, because that's where it all happened that day, and I sat there. I don't remember anything else until I pulled over for blue and red lights, and in California, only cops have blue lights. So I pulled over. I was dragged out at gunpoint. I had a firearm in my pocket. I let them know that, like I always did, had a permit to carry it. And all the cops looked at me and go, "What the hell is going on? Why in the hell are we?" And I'm like, "I don't know." So a few of them didn't know me as well as like the sergeant and everybody else, and they were assholes. They said, "We got you a camera going in this lady's house," and I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So basically what they did is they arrested me for first-degree burglary that night, and that's due to the fact the lady was home. That's how you get first-degree burglary over anything else. And basically, I was arrested for the first time in my life. Never had any kind of criminal record before this or anything. And I was arrested on first-degree burglary and put into the county jail, which I thought was going to be the biggest oh fuck of my life, because I've been to the jail running calls. I've never been in any of this. This is kind of, it's making me a little nervous.
It's one thing to go to the jail. It's another thing to go to
be in the jail.
And so they booked me in. No one can figure out what's going on. I sit in a holding cell all night. You can't call out, because remember, what does everybody know right now? You have cell phones. If anybody can tell me a number in their cell phone, I'll shake their hand.
Yeah.
So luckily, I had a person that lived there that had a cell phone number that started and continued as the same. So the prefix just followed for their number. So I remembered that. But when you're in jail at the payphone, you need a phone number to call. They ain't going to give you anything. So just a little tip for anybody, if you got
memorize a couple.
Yeah, memorize a phone number or two. So yeah, they told me that's what it was. They asked if I was going to bail out. I said I plan on it. And finally, about 8:00 that morning, the deputy came in, and yes, this is illegal, but I will say it anyways. And he asked me for all the combinations to the safes at my house. He says, "You know what we do when we raid a house?" I said, "Yeah, you call me. I bring the search saw over and I cut the safe open for you. I've done it many a times for you. Here's my combos." They still went to my house, kicked doors, beat the shit out of everything. They spent 12 hours at my house, raiding my house with over 100 firearms, 500 magazines, and 250,000 rounds of ammo. It was an 84 item inventory. Sorry, it don't add up. They did that. They charged me with assault weapons after the raid. They wrote the search warrant for stolen property. They found none. They found guns, which all of them have been in my house. The DA all the way down. We had DA parties every year at my house. Cooked, everything. Best friends with all of them. They had no clue these guns were there. So they took everything. I showed up at the jail. They said they were going to rearrest me. They all kind of smiled and winked at me. That's when I knew this shit's getting real, right? That's when I knew, like, okay. And so I get out of my lawyer's truck after we just passed by my ex-wife, by the way, that has both my dogs in the back. She was at my house the whole day during the search warrant. That's illegal, just to let everybody know out there. I see that, and no one cares. I get out of the lawyer's truck, and one of the cops calls me DJ, which is what my family and close people call me. As soon as he said that, I went, okay, they're setting me up here. I get this. So I went in. They sat down. They said, "Since you have counsel, we cannot ask you any questions, but due to health and safety code, we can ask you this. Are there any more bombs?" And I went, "There are no bombs to begin with." Oh, no.
Any more bombs implies that there were bombs to begin with.
Exactly.
Were there bombs in your house?
No.
Okay.
So they said that, and I went, I don't, And the lawyer took me outside. He goes, the answer is no. That's it. And I said, no. So they rearrested me on charges that during COVID do not incur any bail, assault weapons charges, blah, blah, blah. So basically, I got let out of jail for nothing that night. So the next day, my cousin takes me to my house with a few other friends, and we get there and the house is destroyed. Again, trying to shorten this up for you guys. Someone came up to my house that night that wasn't supposed to be there, that's a former cop. He ended up saying that I threatened to kill people with a recorder in my pocket going. I never threatened to kill anybody. The guy stayed there, threatened for his life for 40 minutes, hanging out with me. They come up with a concoction that says I threatened to kill him, my ex-wife, and her new cop boyfriend. Or sorry, my wife, because we weren't actually divorced then. Basically what happened is it got ignored because I was too dangerous for the cops to come to my house at night because of, well, they'll tell you the research they've done on me. So they didn't. The next day, my cousin came up about 3:00 in the afternoon, said, we need to go speak with your lawyer. I said, yeah. And he goes, well, he wants you to see a psychiatrist. I said, please, something's not right here. Like
things aren't adding up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They took me to the lawyer's office down into the basement. They let me read my auto bio, which I brought a copy for you guys. I think Paul's read it. And I read it and I said, this is what's wrong with me. It's all this death and destruction, everything. That's all I see anymore. And they walked me upstairs to the waiting SWAT team and a sergeant from the sheriff's office that used to be my football coach. He took me into custody. He did not cuff me. He cuffed me in front. He treated me with nothing but respect. He took me to the jail and asked and had a thing put on saying he needs mental help. This is not this guy. I've known this guy. They incarcerated me. They stripped me butt naked and threw me in a hole for 6 fucking days. Nowhere to piss and shit but a grate in the corner for no reason. I got out of there. I spent 30 days in solitary and another trip in the hole for no reason. I finally worked myself because I couldn't use a phone or anything in solitary out to General Pop, where they said they're going to kill you because of what you did. I said, I'll take my chances. I went out into General Pop, and I hate to tell you, there was 3 or 4 guys in there that happened to be the shot callers, if you want to call that, in the cell, that I happened to save their life on duty, and they remembered me. I had nothing but a great experience in jail for 30 days. I hate to tell you guys this, but I think, like, for your guys as listeners, take what you got and take what you've learned. For me, I was a fireman, and use that. I need to survive in this. Like, use your skills to survive. Just because you're in jail doesn't mean the stuff you learn, like A, respect, and B, the attitude test, it gets you a long way. Anywhere. It's like, learn that. And I made friends with a lot of these people. A lot of the writings I did in jail, I'm sitting at a metal table crying, writing, and I got guys, because you walk the cell block, that's your exercise, pat me on the shoulder as they walk by. And I helped a couple guys get their charges dismissed while in there, because that is kind of what I do, is investigate things. And after about 17 protective orders that were tried to put on me, I bailed out for $455,000 on June 23rd, I believe. I was escorted by 2 armed people with an ankle monitor on that I paid for myself to a place in Berkeley. I spent 2 months at this place, which was for people with federal meth charges. I've never tried meth in my life. I don't know how that got started. Spending 2 months there, not getting any help, but working 16 hours a day, cooking and cleaning for these people. I got to the outside. I got a hold of the IFF, and on August 15th of 2020, I flew to Baltimore and stayed 2 months in Upper Marlboro, Maryland at the IFF COE.
Tell the listeners what IFF is.
Yeah, it's the International Association of Firefighters, and then the COE stands for Center of Excellence. I will tell you, it saved my life. There's over 3,000 firemen that have been through there that probably 90% of them will tell you it saved their life.
Is it just like a get well place, or
so it's a
gathering place, or
yeah?
what?
So it's an inpatient program. Basically, you can pay cash. I paid cash for all my 2 visits there. It's not cheap, but I did. And yeah, it's you live there. We have 4 bunk houses, which are set up like fire stations. I mean, if you go there, they get what we do. I think it would get what the military does. It would get what cops do. Like, it would fit all of us. Everything is kind of like, hey, here you are in your comfort zone of being a fireman. Now we're going to work on your feelings. And it's like, yeah, whatever. And it works. You have one individual session a week. That's it. The rest is group stuff. I know we talked before this.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
We did a thing called Trauma Group, which was awesome, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, it was a great place. I went back again last November for a month, which was great. Again, it's a great place for service personnel, period. I got out of there. No one could tell me where I could go, except I could not go to California. I owned $1 million house. I was not allowed back there. So I flew to Arizona, which is where my mom lived, with an ankle monitor on that was not being monitored for the next 2 months. And eventually they cut it off me. And I've spent the last probably 3 whatever years fighting this case. There's a lot in the case. What I like to reference it to is, if anybody knows Matt Best, he wrote a book called Thank You for My Service. Yeah. That's where I took this. My service, protecting those people and doing all I could for them. My thank you was 31 felonies.
Wow.
On 8/23, which was just over a month ago, all 31 felonies, and the entire case was dismissed against me.
Congrats, brother.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to go through all that.
It'll
never make sense to me why some people do. Like, why, I don't know, why the universe picks certain people to walk those roads.
Why are you getting picked on?
Yeah, but I mean, first of all, thanks for coming on and sharing that, right? Because that's a powerful story. And I think it can reach a lot of people. There's obviously a lot of resiliency that goes on in that. And we'll get to all those things. I don't know if I have a list of questions already, Roscoe. I don't know about you. So, but with the background of your story, so it sounds like 2004 was when you had that highway experience, that crash, where then you were subsequently after that, they said you have PTSD. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my turning point when I'll tell you, I took some time off again, and I drank a lot of beer.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was like, okay, if he's really drinking a lot and he's isolating, he's having issues again. And that happened twice. That's why I refer to it that way.
So 04 to 18, I guess my first question would be like, what was your initial reaction to the diagnosis that you had PTSD back in 04, like the very first diagnoses? Were you like, yeah, whatever, dude, fuck that shit, like I can push through? Because I'd imagine, listening to your story, it sounds like the fire department does a really good job of teaching you guys to compartmentalize, like the Department of Defense teaches us to compartmentalize. And it's really easy to just go, all right, I'm going to separate that shit. It goes back here. We know plenty of guys in our line of service, alcohol is an easy way to self-soothe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You feel good, you get happy, especially if you're a happy drunk, you don't think about that shit. Easy way to go. Like, tons of us have done it.
Not only that, but you're mid-20s at this point?
Yeah. Probably late 20s
in 04. Yeah. I would have been 24 probably.
Yeah. So mid-20s, you're full of,
piss and vinegar
and bravado and ego and
So what was your initial, I would be curious, what was your initial reaction to that first PTSD? Was it kind of that, like, just compartmentalize, whatever, fuck it, I'll just push through, I got a job to do?
Yeah.
And I feel good at work when I'm doing it, so.
I don't actually remember the meeting. I know the doctor. I remember some of it. Basically, I think what happened in this is my former chief that was taking care of me at the time, my battalion chief, he was very involved in it. So it'd be like your squadron leader, right? It was okay, Roscoe's having issues. We'll pick on him. Hey, I'm going to go chat with him. I know Roscoe. And so basically he came over and chatted with me, and he goes, dude, everything I've seen, all the doctor stuff, because he was very involved. He came down and he goes, you are suffering from what you did at work. And in '04, this wasn't like a known thing then. It was,
Sure.
they were still dabbling with it.
Yeah.
And so he's the one that actually filed the claim for me. And I'm very happy he did, because really then I had no clue what the hell was
Yeah.
going
And
on.
you wouldn't have done it yourself, correct?
I don't think so. I didn't know enough.
So, you know, and let me just, I'll say this too, right? Like early 2000s, there were, even for us growing up in the Air Force, right? There was a complete stigma attached to if you went and saw a mental health specialist, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and you couldn't even, and if you did, you sure as fuck wouldn't report it because it could affect your security clearance. It could affect all kinds of things, right? Like obviously they don't want crazy people flying fighter airplanes, right? I think a lot of that's changed in the last 20 years. I think that stigma to some respect has
maybe
lessened. And I think that there's just maybe more of a recognition that, you know, not all health crises make you completely unstable, right? With the right help to a certain extent.
I would 100% agree with you. The problem in my instance is due to my service PTSD. I'm 100% mentally defective per the U.S. government at this time, which should not be on me. I have lost my firearm rights for no reason. And the fact that I sought treatment, which was voluntary, I paid for it out of my pocket, has caused all this. It is basically, you took a stigma and put it on me when I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
I've actually tried to help myself. I admit I have an issue. I know I do. The other thing is, the 31 counts you put against me were all dismissed because of my mental health. But yet I'm 5 years still waiting for my medical retirement. I haven't had money since 2019 when I burned up all my leave. And so how I look at it, if you're going to put the stigma on something, help them with it.
Yeah.
There was never any help.
Or have a bureaucratic process that goes, hey, if you go through these programs and the doctors write you off, then you're good to go, kind of a thing. So I guess my question would be, and understanding that there were stigmas associated and stuff like that, do you think, and this is kind of, I guess, stupid in some respects because it's a what if, right? But like, what if in '04 with that PTSD, if the IFF had a program at that point, if you would have known about, and maybe who knows if they did, or if you would have even known about
17,
it, would that have made a huge difference in maybe your ability to be resilient through the other big fires that then you faced that really were the ones that it seems like, based on your story, kind of launched you over the edge? Like, were there skills that you learned on how to deal with that stuff, or was when you got to IFF and went through that, intense in-person program, was it, there was so much there to deal with by that point that it was?
Yeah, there was so much there for me. I mean, I don't blame anyone out of it. In '04, when it was diagnosed, I didn't understand it. The problem happened with me and at least my doctors, and I see it with a lot of other people, is every 10 years, the DSM dialectical statistics manual.
Yeah, DSM.
Out. And the problem with that, it was never meant to diagnose, but that's what they do now. And so when I got diagnosed with PTSD, my doctor had a hard-on for bipolar. And so we never really knew through my entire life what this was. And so with the idea of we don't really know what's causing this, I started taking it on myself to go, well, I do this job. I see this shit. These are my problems. I'm kind of guessing I'm having issues with what I've seen. Call it what you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
And, but the big thing for me was in 19, I started seeing a psychiatrist that sees first responders, and he is a former one, really good dude. And he did all he could with me. I was not ready to let it go. I think for me, at least, until I finally said I'm done with this, I couldn't concentrate on healing from it. And that has been the big thing in 4 years that I've learned, not only with my career and my case, until the trauma's done, you can't process it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very true. And I think that was me. I've talked to my former psychologist and tell him, dude, I'm sorry I wasn't ready. When it came out of me in the flashbacks and stuff, and I got to the IF, I was ready. And it still took me 2 months there to get through a lot of this. I will say, after that first meeting, my career, I can sit here and talk to you guys about it, not tear up, it is truly in my rearview mirror. I can still use it. I still use a lot of it in current life and my current situation. But I think the trauma's gone, and I owe a lot
because
of it.
you spent the time to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's
exactly.
and instead of letting it fester, and let's not gloss over the point that firefighters, LEO, paramedics, military, even Katie is a nurse,
Doctors and nurses.
100%.
There's things that you can't unsee. I mean, anybody who's driven up on a bad car wreck on the side of the road, and I would venture to guess, and this is just a stab in the dark, but I would venture to guess that most civilians aren't accustomed to seeing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We tend to take a lot of that for granted or get numb to it to a degree,
To a certain extent, sure.
But all that shit is still in there. And you run the risk of that stuff boiling up to a head like a big old pimple,
Yeah.
and eventually it's going to pop.
Yeah.
And in your case, maybe in 2004, 2005, if you would have had an outlet to deal with that stuff then, learn some of those skills and tools and resiliency tricks and techniques, maybe it would have prevented some of this stuff in the future because you would have known how to file that shit away appropriately.
Yeah, or the resources that you could go to get help.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think in 2004 there wasn't really.
There might not have been much of a structure around it. Yeah.
There really wasn't.
Even in the military, we weren't talking about that until the late aughts. After
Iraq
and Afghanistan.
We're
these guys are starting to come home and have a lot of problems, and the VA starts going
suicide rates are going
killing
up.
themselves.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. If we have a listener out there that is maybe dealing with some mental health issues, maybe they've even been given a diagnosis kind of like you were in 2004, what advice would you give them after going through what you've gone through? What would you just say to somebody like that? Because maybe they're a younger man, younger woman, maybe they're in a service profession. Like I said, we're good at compartmentalizing. And kind of the problem with compartmentalizing, at least this has been my experience in my life, is it works and it can work for a very long time, but your cup only holds so much. And at some point it's going to fucking overflow. And I'm here to tell you, it's not pretty when it does. And so, however that manifests. And so what advice would you give to somebody?
If you were young, like I was in 2004, I would tell you start looking at yourself then. What I figured out finally, and this took me till probably 18 or 19, is to actually look at myself, not consider the label against me,
right?
But to look at it and go, okay, am I bipolar? Okay, I'm depressed. That's usually been the number one thing of my PTSD is depression. I don't feel it anymore, so it's getting better. I'll get depressed, but my body doesn't feel it. So somehow I've learned to deal with that. Anxiety, I do not have it anymore. The thoughts of going through it, what I will tell anybody at any time and anything that you have to make a decision that you doubt yourself in, keep that with yourself and work it out quick. Because most of my, I would say PTSD is decisions I made that I could never come to grips with. I didn't go up and get the girl, my friend's daughter. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And that I feel was the number one thing that kind of let me go to it, with the caveat of I never really had any help to try to deal with it either.
Right.
And a lot of us are going through this with no help because in the service, even there's still that stigma that I'll just say it, you're a pussy if you admit you have problems. You are going to lose your career if you go out there and say, hey, the shit I've done for the last 20 years for you people is kind of bothering me. Well, sorry, see ya. And that's to me the problem is that some people think that you're a pussy because you feel that way, and other people will listen to this podcast because they feel the way I do and they're trying to figure it out. I think that's where the change needs to be, is just help your employees, because to me it stops from the top down. Help your employees with it. Give them all the support you can, but don't ever threaten to take away what they hold so much, because that was me. If I admit to this, I'm done. Like they're going to be like, you can't do this anymore. And that was a big fear of mine. I mean, that's why I always tried to hide it. And then finally, when I'm like, I'm done, this has screwed me up, I'll tell anybody anything. I mean, you can ask me any diagnosis, any med. I'm an open book now, and I feel that should help people. Like medication, I'm a very good book for that because I've been on most of it.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. You know, they put me on some shit that was horrible for 12 years, like benzos that's unheard of. But I want people to know that. So when they're like, "Hey, I'm taking Ambien because I can't sleep," yeah, do that for maybe a month, but don't take it for 12 years like I did.
Yeah.
You'll get screwed up from it.
Yeah.
And they don't bother to tell you that. So I think for anybody, do your own research. And I don't mean searching Google. Start there. The internet's a powerful tool. But don't AI stuff. Go on and just look at people. Look at stories, truths that's happened to these people. It's no secret. It's just the people that have it don't talk about it that much because people still look down on it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's getting more and more mainstream, though, and there's a ton of podcasts out there where people talk about this stuff all the time. I mean, look at like Sean Ryan, or the Black Rifle Coffee podcast. I mean, there's so many of them out there because all these veterans are now, older and they're retired or separated, and they don't have that fear hanging over their head. I mean, dude, we were there, man.
Yep.
And Doug, we were talking about this on the way over here about one of the big reasons why you don't see that self-identification a lot in our career field was they could temporarily or permanently hold your security clearance. And if you don't have a security clearance, then you can't go into the vault. And if you can't go into the vault, you can't go fly airplanes. And flying was, and that was something I wrote down when you were talking, was that identity that you associate with your job. You were Doug the fireman, and if somebody threatened to take that away from you, that's a big fucking deal, man.
Yeah.
That's a huge blow, especially to a 24-year-old kid who's, working his way up, been promoted quickly. He's on the rise and he's going to do great things. And then all of a sudden you're threatened with the possibility of having somebody take that away from you, all because you just wanted help. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could see where somebody would not want to do that.
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think it happens a lot. And it may not even be the stigma of losing your job. It could just be the cultural piece of it too, right? Or the circle that you run in and being afraid of being viewed as as the other, because you're having issues. But I think the bottom line is, like, if you're struggling with that stuff, dude, there's a couple of different paths you can take, right? One, get help, right? Mm-hmm. And that help can come in a number of different forms. Because this is one thing that I think is so funny, and I think it's more difficult for men sometimes than it is for women. And I don't have anything to back that up except for the fact of the guys that I grew up around and have spent most of my life around. But like we talk a lot about physical fitness and take care of yourself physically, and even in the military, there's a big emphasis on that, taking care of your body, PT test, blah, 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 blah. But dude, the mental piece of it is just as important, if not more important, right? Yeah. Because if you're fucked up in the head at all, it's going to affect all the other things, right? Yeah. Your discipline, your ability to function, if you're going into states of depression or you're drinking a lot, none of that stuff's good for you, right? So
you gotta have balance, man.
Yeah, you do. So find help, and you can find that a bunch of different ways. Like Doug was saying, you can just start by a little bit of self-inspection, like what's going on for me, and start doing some research, finding a group like the IFF or something that's similar to that, that maybe you can reach out to for resources. If you're a veteran, the VA has so many resources, man. Yeah. Groups, we talked about groups. You've talked about a ton of times on the podcast, Roscoe, about how, dude, you can get on Google and you can't find, you can't throw a rock without hitting a group that helps people with something.
That's right.
So if you're struggling with something, even if you're not sure what it is specifically, go try a group, man. Yeah. And see if it works. Because we were talking at the beginning in the pregame, Doug, like that group setting is powerful. Mm-hmm. You can get a lot out of group conversation and group discussion. That's not one-on-one therapy necessarily, but just recognizing and normalizing for yourself that maybe what you're going through, it's not just you, right? You're not the only person that has this issue. You're not the only person that's struggling with these things. There's a bunch of other fucking people out there that are going through the same thing. And then you can pick up tips, and tricks and techniques from those folks that can maybe help you combat that a little bit. You start to pick up some skills, some resiliency tools, some things like that, right? So,
well, what about your groups of five, right? Your little pockets of tribe or pockets of friends or influences or whatever. And obviously those people that you work with, that's a giant piece of that, right? But maybe if you're worried about identifying to them at the risk of being called a pussy or being, pushed aside or become an outsider, try a different club or a different group. And a lot of people may go to church or, go down to your local AMVETS or American Legions or something. I'm sure there's something. Go to a different firehouse maybe and just go sit around the ready room and talk to bros, and Cass and I have found that there's great power in just groups of guys getting around and shooting the shit,
sharing
man.
stories.
Yeah, just sit around and talk. And it doesn't have to be anything formal. And none of us are licensed therapists and none of us know what the fuck we're really talking about.
Yeah.
But just to sit around like we did on your porch last weekend, just sit there and BS, man.
Yeah.
Doug and I
Get
talked
some
for
stuff
almost
off your
3 hours.
chest.
Yeah, we just sat there bullshit and drank a pot of coffee and all right, man, I feel better. Let's go home.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then obviously the last part would be getting professional help, whether that's an in-person intensive or a therapist of some sort. We've had Alicia on here. She deals specifically with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
She helps a lot of people every day when she's at work doing her thing. So there's help out there, and those people are there to help you build skills.
Yeah.
I will say the other tough caveat, which I don't know if you're separated or retired.
I'm retired.
Okay, so you're out of the everyday like Roscoe is per se.
Yes.
When you lose that, you lose any support system you have. And I know you say you can go down to the base and chat with them, but it ain't the same.
It's not the same,
anymore,
yeah.
right? And then when you're made to look like the biggest piece of shit in the world, nobody wants to talk to you. And so what I've seen there is you take the only support I had away from me. And now when I told people like, you don't want to take me out of work, I kind of see why now, because work allowed me to separate stuff. I would go there for 2 days. I'm sure you guys have the same thing. You go to work, you're going to hop in a jet and you're going to go do some cool training.
Yeah, it's your alter ego.
Yeah.
Shit could happen though. This is me living my dangerous side, right? And we all have that. But when you take that from us, what do we need to be fit for anymore? I'm not responsible for this town and saving you're not responsible for a plane. And so when you take all that, I think it puts anybody into a thing where now you've got to find it. I think the reason I searched so hard is I was left alone. It was me. And so I was like, well, if anybody's going to figure this out, I need to. And I've been very honest with prior counselor. I wasn't ready. I'm sorry. I finally saw it.
No, and there's truth in that.
Yeah.
You have to be ready to go through that process. If you're not ready, then you're not going to be able to do the work. Right.
Well, for us at the end of a 20-year career, they give us a flag and that shit's over with, man. Yeah. And even me, I go to the base every day and I'm still around them every day. I'm still around fighter pilots all day, every day, but it's not the same. You're just the old guy who went to a red flag one time or whatever, and, but that goes back to that identity piece of it.
It does, and the ego.
When that is taken away from you and you take that cape off at the end of the shift, at the end of the week, at the end of the career or whatever, that's why it's so important, guys. It's so important to find something that brings you fulfillment in your life.
Yeah.
And it could be anything from fucking gardening to talking to other people and sharing your story or fucking doing marathons. It doesn't matter. Find something that gets you up in the morning.
Yeah.
You need a why. You have to find a why.
Yeah. And it's hard sometimes, I think, especially in career fields like this, because, the work is kind of all consuming sometimes. But that's one thing that I was not good at when I was younger was I wasn't good at finding things that were going to help sustain me when that was over. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because you don't see the finish line when you're young like that.
And you're working,
you're living right here.
You are. But I think that's smart. I think it's smart if you can to start to find, those things that also bring you joy or bring you fulfillment as you're going through that process, because there are things that you can always fall back on instead of all of a sudden having the door slammed and you're like, well, shit, what do I do now?
Exactly.
And you got nothing to hang your hat on kind of.
We're walking out of the squadron that last time and kind of leaving the base in the rearview mirror, and you kind of have this, fuck, now what am I going to do?
Yeah, right.
Like, I've never been in a situation where I had to choose my own clothes for work. I had a uniform that I knew exactly what I was going to wear every day of the week. And now I go into my closet every morning and I'm like, should I wear the khakis or, like that's it.
He wore the brown pants.
Yeah. And we laugh about it, but it's so fucking true, man.
Yeah, it is.
And when you're faced with the little things like that that you just never thought of.
Well, it's
I never
structured.
thought about that shit when I was 25 years old,
Yeah.
you know, because the Air Force for my entire adult life had told me when to go to work, what to wear, when to eat, what to do. I didn't have a lot of choices to make. You know, where we're going to go drinking this weekend. That was
it's structure, and when you're used to structure, and then all of a sudden that structure is left up to you, and you haven't thought about it, that can be a difficult process.
It's a pivotal moment, man, and not everybody deals with that shit. Great,
Yeah,
you know,
that's very true.
And we know people who life after the military or the service or whatever. That's when it really hits them. That's when this shit starts to really boil up because you never dealt with it back then, and now that shit's over with, and you're kind of out on an island by yourself, and you're like, well, fuck, man, I'm actually kind of fucked up from this. But guess what? There's not that same. You don't have that same group of dudes. Like you can't go into the bar on a Friday afternoon and be like, guys, let's just get a Jack and Coke and talk this out.
And that's what leads to guys having problems sometimes too, is because it becomes very isolating, and if you self-isolate to begin with, right, then that circle just continues to shrink, and all that's left is you. And that can be a bad place to be in if you're dealing with anything from a mental health perspective. And then you start to throw any kind of substance abuse addiction on top of it, right? That's not a good place to be. Yeah. So, Doug, I got another question for you, because when you were telling your story, brother, you said, you know, you had been drinking and then were sober for about 5 years. And you made a comment in there. You said, you got to find your self-control, right?
Yeah.
So how did you find your self-control? What was it that allowed you to find that self-control for yourself?
I think I was pushed to it.
Say more.
So in 2004, I went through, so a keg of beer is 15.5 gallons. You get 100, don't ask me why I know this. You get 196 or 396 12-ounce beers out of a keg of beer. I was drinking one a week in 2004. The only time I would sober up was to drive to the store and get more beer. That happened. And so through my career, I stopped. I drank a little bit. I stopped. I socially drank. And then I would say sometime probably in 14 or 15, if you look at the fire history, shit just started getting nasty.
It was bad. Like 14 to 18.
Yeah.
They had, was the huge fire in 17 or 18?
They were all.
That they had that. But they had that massive one in the north, and then that other big one that was down in the south, right along the coast, north of LA, that went through all of those towns. Remember that?
So for us, the 18 was the River Ranch, which was the largest fire in California history. And then in 17, I had the Mendo Lake in Redwood Valley. And at the same exact time, we had, I think it was the fountain, the one in Santa Rosa. And so everything went there. We had basically, and so it was just the perfect storm. There was one in Lake County. I mean, it was going wild. And I just remember, like, when I was at work, I never wanted to drink. You know, I think there's some rumor that I was fired due to alcoholism, but I'll tell you, when I was at work, I loved what I did. I honestly spoke with many therapists about what's called DID. It's I just totally forgot it, but DIDs is an identity disorder. Basically, you have kind of...
Is it disassociation?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just missed the first word.
He's a fucking nerd.
I love it, because DSM, like I say, not many people know that. I've read the thing. So
disassociation is a big deal too.
So they said no, and I said, but what I mean is when I'm at work, I'm completely different. Like, I am completely different.
Two parts, right? Yeah. Like you got the part at work, and then you got the part not at work.
Exactly. And so when I would come home, I had great property. I had all kinds of stuff. I had fun. I had guns. I had gun range. We would drink beer. Like I had a kegerator at my house. It wasn't a big deal. What started happening was, like, in 17, when I was off work, I'd have like 2 drinks at night, decent drinks. And so I had a decent buzz. I would sleep. Of course, I was also taking Ambien on top of it, because that's what they prescribed me. Never abused any pills, nothing. Never abused anything else but alcohol. And so when I went through that and I look back, and then what happened in 19 when it was finally brought out and I went to rehab, the biggest fear I had, I'm going to die when I detox, because they put that scary thought into you.
Yeah, well, alcohol is like one of the hardest things to detox too.
When I went to rehab that time, we were on no like major medication or anything. I think you got trazodone or Seroquel to sleep, which is non-habit forming. It's no big deal. I had maybe 3 or 4 nights where I couldn't sleep well. Not that I ever slept well in the beginning, and some sweats. Other than that, other than probably 6 months into my sobriety, I had sweats. So that's a misclaimer I want to tell everybody. You're right. There can be, it's very controllable just by giving you Ativan when you're in your detox to control that. So don't use that as an excuse in your mind. What showed me though is when I was sober and I spent 14 days, and I would tell anybody, if you're having an issue, you don't need to go to the high-end facility, just go to one. It's the group setting. It's all of you sitting around. It's you hearing other people's stories why they drink too much. Then they hear your story why you drink too much, and they can relate. Or if anything, like with mine, they're like, no shit, I would have got drunk too.
Yeah.
I know that's not the right thing to say, but for someone like me, it felt good. Like, okay.
Yeah, it normalizes it, right?
Yeah. And so when I started with that and I got home and I saw my life imploding, I was battling in my mind to get a divorce, to leave the fire service. I can't do this drinking. And honestly, I didn't miss it. And so when this happened 11 months after my sobriety, it shows that the benzos I was on, your detox is 1 year afterwards. You maybe wonder why I was having all these flashback problems. So for anybody with an addiction, I write a thing on it. If these guys want to put it up on, their thing, I actually write a thing about trauma and ETOH brain. And ETOH brain to me is any addiction. Pornhub, I mean, you can read it in there. Meth, whatever your choice is. It could just be isolating. I mean, but it's all due to something else. People need to understand that you're not sitting around drinking because you're happy and you want to go out and have fun tonight. You're sitting around because you're depressed. You think your life's miserable.
Yeah, there's something else going on.
And see that in yourself. Don't take the societal thing. And that's what made it for me. Yeah, enough people told me you're not an alcoholic, you got PTSD problems. But I always knew that. I think once I finally accepted it, like I can control my drinking. I cannot control this at this time. I just did. And right before I went back to the IFF, I started drinking a little bit again at home. And I drank a little. That's why I say I had 5 years sober. I went there. I never touched anything after that. Like, I'll go out with you guys and have a beer tonight. I'll go to the game on Tuesday with my mom and have a beer. It doesn't affect me anymore. I've got a couple Modelo's. I love a good red michelada beer. Always have loved that. I'll have one once a week.
Yeah.
And I have non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
And so what I did for myself is finally came to the conclusion, this is not going to be helpful for me because I'm not a drunk that drinks one night and then we go 2 weeks. If I start, I'm going to keep going. It'll start
you
affecting my
binge.
day,
Yeah.
my life, and I know that.
Yeah.
And so I think coming to grips with yourself, understanding it, is kind of how you get out of the addiction. I've been to enough facilities for things. They're all the same. Leave the old life behind, start a new life. And that's what I would say. The one thing that has kept me sane and has helped me more than anything was being moved down here, because I got out of the place where I saw all the trauma that I had to drink my life away for.
Remove that environment.
Yeah.
And
that's huge.
And the number one help.
That's huge. Separation can be a big help in those things. And the disassociation makes a lot of sense because I'm not an expert, but what I understand with disassociation a lot of times, like, how you've talked about how you would do something, but you don't remember doing something. That's those two parts. You've got a part that's showing up doing that. Then you go back into the other part. That part doesn't remember it because it wasn't the part that was in control when you were actually doing it, right? Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense.
Bro, Katie will bring up something from like 2005 when we were going through flight training. She'd be like, hey, you remember this person that lived around the corner down here? They had these 2 kids. I ain't got a fucking clue, dude.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, everything in my brain was wrapped around flight school.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
I don't remember my kids' birthdays. I remember the pictures. I remember the snapshots that I've seen, but I don't remember being there.
But you remember 18 years ago when you were on a training mission.
Dude,
yesterday.
I could probably tell you every single sortie I flew.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. I could tell you what we did, where we were, who was in it, and how many bad guys we killed. But I can't tell you that in 2005, my kid's 3rd birthday, we did XYZ. I don't know what kind of cake he had. I don't remember what his presents were.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And when you get to that extreme example like this is how it manifests, unfortunately. But the cool thing is, though, is it took a lot of work. There's a lot of hard knocks in there, but you're on the other side of it now.
Yes.
You're on the other side and you can look back on it. And this is resiliency in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Is you come out the other side of it and you look back and you go, man, I hate that happened to me, but I'm a better person now because of it.
Yeah.
100%. A lot of people talk to me like, how is it to leave the service? And I said, if I knew I could do this life I have now 20 years ago, I would have
Keep
left
it
then.
gone. Yeah.
Because what I'm doing now is really the passion I always saw there. Everybody in the fire service told me I should have been a cop. I mean, my family were cops. I acted like a cop. I looked like a cop. I was just a fireman. Well, now I get to do the investigation side. So it's like, okay, I took the skills I enjoy that I'm really good at, and I've matured them in something after the fire service. And that's been the biggest thing I've gotten out of this, is like the last 4 years, 4.5, even going through probably the largest gun case in California history. I've made it through that, and I'm actually succeeding out of it.
Yeah.
Not to get political, but I take what Trump says to heart. My revenge will be my success. And that's what I mean. I plan to be a success out of this. I plan to help people with my story. I plan to help a lot of people legally if I can, because that's seeming to be the next realm. Us public safety military are getting in when we have these problems.
Yeah.
So that's my goal. I look at it. I've always wanted to help people, and I'm going to continue doing that. And actually, I think I can make a way bigger impact where I am now than what I did then.
You come from a place of experience too, and you know, anybody that hears your story is gonna you have that credibility. Man, I've been there. I've done that. It sucked, but I made it through.
Yeah.
And you know, I was listening to him just now, and Flash kind of said the same thing. You know, years after retiring from the Air Force, we were interviewing another guy, old friend of ours, and he says, "Dude," he's sitting back in his chair on the Zoom call, and he goes, "Look at this. This is happiness.
Yeah.
Like, I am really happy in life right now.
place.
I'm doing what I want to do. I'm having fun doing it. I'm sharing my experiences with other people. It's almost the same
to
thing."
Come do this with you guys. I mean, early because we're not.
I got up at the crack of 8 to come over here.
I was up. I was out relaxing, and I was really looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Like I really was. And to be honest with everybody out there, this is healing for me. What I'm doing right now, telling my story, explaining myself, it makes me relive it too, in a positive way.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, not a lot of people can go out there and share their personal stuff. For me, the reason I do, it was all shared already with the cases and everything. So
Yeah.
I don't care what people know about me.
You know, that's a really interesting point though, Doug, because I think a lot of times, especially as men, we're afraid to share those deeper, darker, scary pieces of ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, but what I've found is that once you do it, it becomes easier to do it. And it is, and in almost everybody that we've talked to on the podcast related to issues like this, that having the opportunity to share their experience, to share their story has always been part of that healing process for them. Every single one of them.
Yeah. You know, something that I find though is, and this is a me problem, I'm sure it applies to other people, is maybe I'll come over here and Cass and I do this in the pregame a lot. We'll just sit here, and before we hit record, we just vent, you know, get some stuff off our chest, you know, stuff we've been thinking about during the week or whatever. And on the ride home, I'm like, man, I shouldn't fucking told Cass that stuff. And it's not because you don't deserve to know that. I mean, we're friends, and we're supposed to share things with each other. We're grown ass men. We have a lot of like experience through our lives. It's inside of me. I'm like, I should be more guarded.
Yeah.
I should play my cards closer to my chest. You know, I shouldn't go around squealing about every little problem.
Well, that's what we're taught to do.
Exactly. You know, so that's that little debrief that I have in my head every time I drive home from doing one of those.
I think we worry about judgment a lot.
Probably.
You know, somebody changing somebody's perception, whatever we think their perception is of us. But you don't have to worry about that with me, man.
Cass is going to break up with me and no more podcasts.
Yeah.
That's
cool. Sounds like a complete different platform, but you guys continue.
Yeah. No shit. Now we were talking, Doug and I were talking on the way over here, kind of on the same subject about the stories that we like to share on here. I like to hear the same things over and over and over again, and it's not specifically the same story, but it's the same ingredients, because the idea is if you tell the same thing 10 different ways, one of them will maybe resonate.
Mhm.
And hopefully there's a listener out there that hears this story and goes, oh man, and it really grabs them, and I can't tell a story like that. I don't have that experience. I have shit that happened to me in my life, but I've never gone to therapy. I've never, gone into a deep dark hole because I walked up on a car accident or something like that. So to hear these same themes over and over and over again, I think is great for the listeners. Maybe one of them, if there's a guy or a gal out there having an issue, one of these is going to resonate with them eventually.
Yeah.
And maybe we prevent some things like what happened to us last year.
Yeah, or have some people get some help if they really need it.
Yeah.
So one last question I have for you, Doug, is when you went to IFF the first time, what were there skills that they taught you in that process that you took away that really kind of set you on that path where you weren't just getting through it, but you were really, what we talk about as resiliency, just coming out of it better on the other side? And if so, could you share with us a little bit about what those things were? Do you have a bipolar? I'm sorry to ask this, so you don't have to answer. Do you have a bipolar diagnosis?
So the second time I went there last year in November, we chatted again, and we came to the fact that I have my PTSD triggers an underlying bipolar, and you'll hear different things: bipolar 1 and 2. I guess I'm the lower one, and I can't remember which one that is. But the reason for why I got this diagnosis of bipolar, which it makes sense to me, so I'm okay with it. I'm not fighting it. That's why I'm sharing it. Is I had bad depression with my PTSD. There's no doubt about that. The other comprehensive to the bipolar is mania. So there's two different types of mania. There's hypo and hyper. Hyper means basically you're ripping your clothes off and, hey, we're watching you run down the street right now for no reason. Hypomania, just like hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. Low mania was me in flashbacks. And I believe that. I'm like, that makes sense. And she goes, it wasn't that you went full mania. You weren't like a danger, but you had to do. And I said, no, I believe that. And so that is underlying. It doesn't bother me, honestly.
Well, it should, man. I mean, I think, and again, this goes back to the stigma piece of it, right? We think, oh, somebody's bipolar, that must be like, we don't even know what it is, but we just have this assumption that it's really bad. But my guess is that understanding that that's actually an underlying condition allows you to manage it better.
100%. And, when it was first talked about, my lawyer at the time, years ago, was like, oh, great, we can get him off because he's got bipolar. And that's another one of those stigma things you throw out. Like, wait a minute, dude, the fact I admit I have PTSD and that's what caused this, can we not just talk? No, you need something else that makes it look better for you. And, and so you're always constantly battling that. And that's what I mean. Sometimes turn off people. I trust the medical director, Abby Morris, at the IFF more than anything in my life. What she tells me, I believe in. She gives me complete examples, complete history on why she feels that way. I will never disagree with her. We can talk about it. She will talk with you, write your letter in case you don't. I mean, it's just, they are there to help you, unlike I see many other places. The model at the IFF, they use CBT, EMDR, group therapy, and they use just about everything. So a typical day at the IFF was 4 different groups. If you're in nothing else, you go to 4 different group classes. They're all about PTSD, from attitude to relationships to, for the month, for the 35 days, which is normally the average, if not the least, I would say you go there. You hit every class once. They're great classes. It's all of you sitting there. And usually I would say about day 10 for most people, they start opening up.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. You got all these other guys, a few girls sitting around you. They're not treated any different. I'll tell you that much. We even had someone that was transitioning that we didn't treat any different. And that was a big thing for me. My first visit, I'm still great friends with that person. And it really helped there. And so what it does is it gets you all together. Through that, with the classes, you get individual therapy. The biggest thing that ever helped me, and I'll tell anybody that's thinking of going to the IFF or that is going to go to the IFF, it's called Trauma Group. Trauma Group, we sit in, there's either 4 or 5 of you, 5 broken firemen, we'll call them. And there's one clinician. And there's a board, and you're in this, we go in the basement room. So it was kind of fitting, and you sit in there, no windows, nothing. There's a whiteboard, and you come up with one incident. Every day, someone does it different, Monday through Friday. You spend 2 hours in there. So for like me, I talked about the 17 incident. It took me 3 trips in there to get through it. But what you do is you write your feelings on the board. You get a feelings wheel. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. It's a wheel, tells you all the feelings, has color charts. And you write this up there, and then you go through telling basically the story like we did here today. And then afterwards you review them. And sure, I was 100% pissed off at these people at first. Now I was only 75. Now and by the time I was done, you know, it took me a month just to go through that incident. It was behind me. I understood it more. And you have 5 other guys that are looking at you going, I've told you my darkest secrets. I told you my uncle raped me when I was young.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand it. That's the one thing I have issues with when I hear about, and I told them all that. And so when you hear that from other people, you don't get shy.
Yeah.
You don't care what you're going to say. And it's very truthful. And I got to say, that is the number one thing. The other thing we say at the IFF, you'll hear this a lot. We had brotherhood in the fire service. You guys had brotherhood in the military. The cops have brotherhood. It ain't there anymore. You guys can agree or disagree with the military. I don't know them. It's not in the fire service. We go to the IFF and we go, this is where the brotherhood starts again, because we're all caring for each other. We don't give a shit what you did.
Yeah.
You know, there's guys there walking around. I was one
Just
of the
there to help.
first with ankle monitors on. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I've been here with that. Like, other people have seen people here, like, you're okay.
Yeah.
It's 15 acres. We have a volleyball thing. Your foods are paid for. It's a great facility, other than the weather at times, because it's right there, you know, if you get a fallout of a hurricane. But I would tell anybody that's a firefighter to look into it. And I would tell any cop or fireman, I hope, or military, I hope we can get something private in the next like 5 years where people can go to with this model. Right now it's only offered for firemen, but I think the other major branches are really missing out with what we do there.
Yeah, dude, that's huge. And what you're really talking about there is getting that shit out, you know, and
processing it.
I know that I've read a lot of your stuff, and that's a big one, man, is if you can't talk about it, write about it, man. It's private, but you're getting it out there. Yeah. And I've given a lot of examples of how this works in even different areas of your life, but journaling is huge. Sit down with a blank sheet of paper or a brand new Word document and just go, man. Just pour your brain out. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. And I've done this, man. If I'm having a really bad day, if I'm pissed off about something or whatever, I'll go back to my computer, open up a blank Word document and just fucking go, dude. And I might write 2,000 or 3,000 words. And then when I'm done, delete, move on.
Yep.
You know, get it out.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes just doing that helps.
Yeah.
I never really wrote through this. I never was anything with writing. My reports were direct and to the point. When this happened, I have a 2,000-page front and back handwritten journal book that I will be cleaning up for the 9 months I went through this, from when I was arrested until basically I was here on December 1st. I wrote every day, mainly about my mental health in it, what this was doing to me. And like I say, I can't wait to get it out. Journaling, to agree with Roscoe, is something I discovered.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool for some people.
It's amazing. And for those out there today, something I do now when I don't type like you should. You know, I'm the finger.
You're a pecker.
So what I've noticed though is, I mean, we're doing it right now. Go get a free Zoom account. I have a paid one so I can do longer. But last night I had something happen that I talked to Roscoe a little bit about today on the drive over, and I just went on there last night and recorded like 40 minutes of just getting it out.
Just talk. Yeah.
I may send it to a friend of mine that knows about it so she can know. But other than that, I mean, sure, I'd post it anytime, but that's not what it's for.
Well, Microsoft Word has a dictate function too.
Exactly.
So you click that dictate button and then you just talk. I use that all the time, man. If I got a thought or something I'm trying to work out, I just click dictate and I go, and it captures it all in written word. And then I can go back and edit it and move things and go, oh, that was fun. You know, but that's huge, man.
So the reason I had a tape recorder in my pocket the night of 4/27/20 when all this went down, or 4/26/20, was because for the last month or two, I was recording stuff on my iWatch. I was constantly recording things because it would, a lot of times in the shower, because I was probably relaxed, stuff just started coming out, but I couldn't remember it the next day. So I started recording it, and that's the only reason I had a tape recorder in my pocket, because the stuff I'm like, I'll never remember it, and stuff isn't adding up. So it had nothing to do with anything. I wanted to record what I was going through because I didn't understand it.
Bro, that device right there, there's so much power in this. I use this so much, man. Voice memos, or go open up my notepad and click the little microphone and just start talking about ideas that I have. I've jumped out of the shower soaking wet and opened this thing up.
Yeah.
And because you're right, man. You get in there and kind of the world fades away and you're relaxed, and all of a sudden the creativity bubble just opens up and you're like, oh fuck. And if you don't get it right then you might miss it.
You will.
Yeah. This is why I've been up since 2:30 this morning, and as I woke up I had an idea and I'm like, oh shit, if I don't write this down right now, it'll be gone in 4 hours when I get up.
People with minds like ours, and I mean, I don't know both you in depth yet, but I can just tell from this talk that it's the same mindset. And for me, what I felt is my mind got full. Like I couldn't retain or process anything. And then once I started getting it out on paper or just verbally, it allowed me to reabsorb.
Yeah, you start unpacking that stuff, right?
And I feel, though, I feel like I'm back up there again because of what I'm dealing with to finish the rest of this out. And so what I've done now, I don't want to say I've hidden out, but I've just tried to lay low. Like I got a lot of work to do. I got a lot of mental prep to go up and represent myself in court next week. Like I'm doing it on my own, which I'm fine with, but that takes a lot. It's a good thing for me because I am rectifying what has happened. And so I see that, but I just look at it now. Hey, you've got presidential candidates that hide for a week or two to do a debate, and I would expect them to. That's kind of what I see now. Hey, I got this going on. Yeah. Let me get next week over and then we'll move on. But until then, just don't bother me.
Dude,
you need prep time.
That's just called focus, man.
No, I know.
You're focusing on the shit that you that's like the closest alligator to the boat.
Near
right
rocks.
Now. Yeah, it's the closest alligator to the boat. And sometimes you do, man. You have to. What you're talking about is that penguins on the iceberg theory. You can only put so many penguins on the iceberg. If you start stacking more on there, some penguins are going to fall off. Well, we can help that process a little bit by getting some of the shit out of here. Clear the RAM, restart your computer. Yeah. In this case, it's your brain.
Well, it's the respect thing too. I see. I mean, after our, 3-hour coffee talk on Sunday, I hopped on my bike and was going to a game, and he's out walking. Well, I know his walks are very him, mentally. And when we go, we're not. And so I'm riding by on the bike. I mean, we just hung out for 3 hours. Normally you'd stop by and say, hey, nope, I just kind of, he didn't, we didn't, but he waved and I just went on, and I'm like,
I'm not going to reach out and slap you off your bike.
No, what I mean though, is we have that respect. And I think that's what people need. If you know how other people are, don't push them when you know it's wrong. Like I wouldn't stop and take up his time for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because he's out doing
his thing.
His time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Right on.
Wow. Holy shit, what a story, man. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Never ceases to amaze me that we can just call up a friend.
Yeah.
And it's like, tell us your story. And then you're blown away by, I mean, when we had Scott on, Scott lives just a few houses down, and he starts telling his story about losing his brother in Afghanistan. And Cass and I are like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
There's people like this everywhere though. And I don't want that. I don't want that to get lost with the listeners and if you see somebody having a bad day, your neighbor, somebody you work with, close friend, family member, whatever it is, be weird. Ask the weird questions.
Ask the questions.
Yeah, for sure. What else you got, man?
I got nothing else, brother. Be the change.
All right, be one. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.